a kid. Ugh. Read by the author, Tracy R.L. O'Flaherty. Chapter 13. Choose Love. Childhood can be a fragment of time. Time to grow, time to learn, time to become set beliefs set by others. Childhood is frail and yet strong. For didn't we feel that nothing could prevent us from experiencing? Our first step with courage, the desire to walk and then run. From pablum to toast, high chairs to booster seats, we grow, we learn, we absorb, we share. Do we know how to share when we are little and when we are old? And what do we share during our years upon the earth? Do we share goodness and strength? Do we share kindness and compassion? Do we share love at its fullest? What do we learn to share? What are we conditioned to share? What did we share that we didn't want to? Not really. The Easter Bunny brought many good treats. I shared. I suppose so did my siblings, and really, if I had it my way, I would have been the only kid in the room to collect the goodies. I suppose that is how we feel when we are children. We know the good stuff. We know the lies that serve us. And as adults, we know the lies that serve us. To be honest with oneself is to be honest. But what do we know that is truth? And what do we know as another's truth? The truth of our parents. Was it true? When we are children, things seem much bigger. Have you ever gone back to a place, to a house, to a yard that perhaps you once played in? Have you returned to grade school as an adult? Doesn't everything look so small? The things that looked and appeared to be big and overwhelming, as years pass, look very small from what we can remember. Is it our size relative to the surroundings? I don't know, but things felt so big when I was growing up. And when I returned as an adult to see my family home in which I was raised, I was taken aback by how small everything looked to me. Had I grown that much, not just in height, but in life experience itself? For the days turned to weeks, then years, then decades. I must have grown, a little one, to one with experience to call my own, just as each have life to call their own. So many times we feel alone. So many times we wish to be alone. So many times we see the world from the eyes of fear and not growth. Fear. It really wasn't there during our first steps. How could it be? We weren't afraid to fall over, to fall down. We weren't afraid until when? When do we know to be afraid? And when do we know to stop being afraid? When do we feel safe, if we ever do? I grew up beside a cemetery. Remember I mentioned of all the generations before me? The fence to the cemetery we could easily climb, and climb we did. We understood that the cemetery held past loved ones, but as a kid, do we really get that? With a confession, hopefully without judgment, but an understanding of innocence, we, as children, turned the cemetery into our play yard. The stones that were high enough to climb on became pretend horses. This is very truthful. There were stones that were rounded at the top, and they made the perfect imaginary horse. We, as children, would find great pleasure in pretending to be riding horses. We even waved to the people that drove by. Now, remember, this was a very small little community where everyone knew everyone. So anyone driving by would be considered a friend of our family. We knew the cars. We knew the families. We knew the ones that were alone and feeling alone. We knew of things just by the car that drove by. Imagine driving by a cemetery with children pretending to ride horses, laughing and playing and singing. Would you consider that outrageous and disrespectful? Or would it be pleasing and bring joy to your heart? Children pretending headstones were horses. What is the perception? And what is the truth? And what is the reaction? My grandfather, my mother's father, is buried in the corner of Franklin Cemetery. His stone lies flat on the ground. His stone has the words of the dates he was upon Mother Earth. Being a kid, with very little to do in a small country setting, not only did we ride pretend horses, we danced on my grandfather's stone. I wanted nothing more than to have tap shoes, and I was lucky just to have shoes. Tap shoes called my heart. I wanted the black shiny shoes with the big click. I wanted to dance. I wanted to hear my steps, and I discovered that I could with the help of my grandfather's headstone. I did have a pair of shiny black shoes to be worn on special occasions, to be worn with a dress on special occasions. But my special occasion was to proudly put the shoes on, jump the fence that lines our backyard, walk to my grandfather, and I would dance. The clicking of my shoes upon the stone, upon the engraved stone, I danced and I danced. The more I danced, the louder the tap. The more I tapped, the bigger the dance. Now, as people drove by, I waved with the biggest smile that could ever be found upon my face. I look back now and giggle and shake my head. For how was I able to fulfill such happiness in a place that was filled with emptiness? Lives below the ground, all held in the oneness of earth. I danced upon the souls of eternal light. I want to think that my grandpa was clapping the song. I want to know that my grandpa thought it was as wonderful as I did. Looking back, I couldn't imagine this tiny girl with bouncing hair upon a grave, tapping to the sound of silence, bringing to life life itself, bringing to life where life wasn't found. I write the words with a full and empty heart, for I am sure that some that drove by were appalled at such behavior, and others drove by and saw the beauty and the innocence. I never did get tap shoes. I never wanted them after my grand performances over that summer. I heard the click in its fullness. I heard the music when it wasn't there. I do know that I felt the love that was created among all. The fence that held what in? The fence that held what out? Fences. It was the only place along the backyard stretch that had a fence, and yet we found a place to play there too. To play among the innocence of eternal light. To play among the lives and the departures. To play among the emptiness is innocence. Is it possible to play among the innocence without judgment, without condemnation? How do we play innocently when the music isn't heard, when laughter isn't heard? How do we find within ourselves the joy that is meant to be? To tap dance without tap shoes, to dance without music, to dance upon my grandfather's grave in the purest of innocence. How can I find words to shine a light on the contrast of life and death itself? Perhaps starting here would be a good place. To start here would be a good place.